So, welcome back to the session Plan and Execute, Post-Upgrade and Regression Tests. Who has not attended the session before? I see some faces who are new, but most came back, that's good. So it was not too boring. Who was not in here? My name is Rainer Markheiser. I'm since 1 year the product owner for test management in Cloud ALM. And in the session before, I gave an overview, mostly focusing on new functionality. I somehow highlighted the functionality of the test plan. In this session, I also will leverage the test plan to show not just how to use test management in Cloud ALM for implementation new processes, but also to have a kind of iterative approach like we do it in Cloud ALM, to deploy and provide features in waves. We call that wave because that term is known from Focus Build. And the first wave, I will explain it then in detail, will be a new implementation. The next wave will be a combination of upgrade of S/4HANA Cloud, enhancements that might have impact on existing processes, and new functionality. And how to orchestrate that would be the challenge. Again, if you like to post anything on the social networks, please use the hashtag ALM Summit. And also, again, disclaimer, anything I mention here should not be a matter of legal obligations or whatever. It's an outlook, what we currently plan to provide in future. But most things I show is already there. What I show anyway is there, but some statements might be forward-looking. And again, it's just a plan, no commitment to any dates and so on. The first I want to introduce a case study where the whole planning and orchestration will be based on. Then I will give a quick overview on the implementation approach that might have been done and hopefully have been done. If not, it's still the possibility for if you do an upgrade and you have already implemented before to use the same orchestration and structuring of test cases in the same way that might have been done in a new implementation. The upgrade and enhancement approach I will highlight. That means it's a mixture of release upgrade for S/4HANA and enhancements and new implementations, a combination of that, and the way how you could orchestrate that with Cloud ALM. And then planning, executing that. I will skip the execution, but I will show you how it looks like because it takes a little bit more time. And at the end, a summary to highlight what is important to take away. So, introduction of the case study. As mentioned, the program or project I call Transformation to an Intelligent and Sustainable Enterprise. Just a term for the whole project. It's a transformation to S/4HANA Cloud, but in combination with other products. And we will include an upgrade. And the first wave is a new implementation of some core processes you typically know in finance and sales, sourcing and procurement. And here we're using S/4HANA Cloud, Ariba, SAP Marketing Cloud, as the solutions that are part of these processes. And the second wave, as mentioned, would be an upgrade of S/4HANA Cloud to the release 23.08, which actually has been deployed to all customers already because it was in August. But we assume we are before that date and want to orchestrate the preparation for these regression tests and also the acceptance test for enhancing and also in implementing an end-to-end process. And here the related solutions would be the SAP Integration Suite as well as BTP. just as an example. It doesn't matter, it could be any kind of solution. We are completely currently disconnected from the execution point of view from the managed system. You can provide URLs as a kind of navigation help, but we don't have the tight integration to the logical components system under test like we have before. This is only relevant for the test automation, where the test automation tool will take care for that. So the question and the challenge is, what is the implementation approach that should have been done in the past? So we assume it's already done. I will highlight what it would be a kind of best practice to do a new implementation for a little bit larger scope than just running one test case and so on. And the main point will be how to plan and execute the tests for wave 2, including the post-upgrade tests and regression tests. That will be the main part, and here we will focus on automated tests. From the orchestration point of view, it doesn't matter if it's automated or manual, but from the execution, of course, automated is the best solution, because you will limit the effort on the tester side. End-to-end integration test, here I will provide an example on how you can do today and compose an end-to-end integration test using several test cases, put it into one test plan, and how to deal with that. Currently it's a kind of workaround. Sequences, as mentioned in the session before, will come later, but there is already a workaround available that could help you at least to survive for the next months. Acceptance tests for new processes is also part of that, but of course that is something you might already know. So one major thing is that if you are working with cloud solutions, the change to a cloud mindset is something that should happen, and that is not easy. It was also not easy for myself, because I also come from the on-premise world with the frequent deployment and whatever we use in Cloud ALM. And a similar approach is also makes sense for customers. Especially for the cloud solutions, fit to standard is the best approach, because if you choose a cloud solution, you want to stick as most as possible to the standard. If you don't want to, or if you want to adjust the standard in a high extended way, you most likely go to private cloud or even on-premise. Therefore, in this way, go fit to standard makes sense. Using the best practice content as much as possible, extend it or change it, adopt it, and wherever needed, you can create your own content. Of course, that is always possible. Agile mindset is important. As I mentioned, this case study, we use 2 waves. That's one level of agile approach coming from the scaled agile framework, where you also have on a low level, on the sprint level, a very frequent working model, and on a deployment level, maybe quarterly, every half year, and so on. That still makes sense. And also for the S/4HANA Cloud, we jumped from a quarterly deployment and upgrade to a half-year model. And therefore, it's also a half-yearly innovation that will get deployed to all the S/4HANA Cloud tenants. You will get a time frame, and the upgrade will happen, and you have time to prepare. Dynamic extensibility and integration, that is something even if you are on cloud solutions, software as a service solutions, you have the possibility to enhance and extend, but in a certain way. Business process, business technology platform, integration suite, these are the platform to integrate, extend your solutions. And of course, standard cloud solutions for procurement, Ariba, S/4HANA, SAP Marketing Cloud. These are things that are going in the space to CRM, and are completing the S/4HANA from a sales perspective and marketing perspective. Digital transformation, it's always a term, and collaborative work, way of working, that's also important. But that is something that you need to make sure. We have here the Activate roadmaps that provides a lot of content where you can work with this change of mindsets, that you could use training material for. We have also consultants that are supporting you in that way. Now going to the first wave, so we have scope 3. We defined 3 scopes to be implemented and assigned several processes to these scopes. And that's a way, even if you have 20 scopes and per scope you have 20 processes, it's already a big amount. So, but it's the same approach. The amount of processes and scopes doesn't matter, so you can still use this approach that I will highlight. And the implementation approach actually is use the Activate roadmap for the implementation. That makes a lot of sense because you get a lot of content, how to work with that, how to maybe get to the mindset, how to prepare your project and so on. As mentioned, we have defined and scoped 13 standard processes with 3 different scopes. That makes sense, and that is somehow indicated with this traceability view for the processes, where you see also these processes in the context or grouped by the scopes. And that is a view you can define, if you like this view, also to track implementation from the beginning from a process point of view. As mentioned, fit to standard, creating requirements for the fit to standard workshops makes a lot of sense for new implementations, and user stories to track the execution of the realization. And also you can combine it with Activate task that could be used also to complete the implementation of each process. Standard test cases are provided. As mentioned in the session before we had Excel-based standard test cases for each scope item, that could be used either for private cloud but also for public cloud. They are somehow could be different depending on the selected best practice process, but currently most of those are similar. But we know that the code lines have been splitted and it might change. So the upgrade and enhancement approach for that scenario will be like this. So we have, next to the already implemented processes, we will have a new scope defined for manufacturing. And we have one end-to-end scenario included that is called lead to cash. All these are part of also the best practice content. For manufacturing, for these scope items, we also have the best practice test cases. For a lead to cash end-to-end scenarios, we don't have that. We have just the structures, we have the process flows, but as the probability that you will adopt this to your own needs is quite high, and therefore providing standard test cases would maybe not accelerate the starting point for that activity. And also here you have the milestones for the releases of S/4HANA Cloud. So the first one, 3202, that was February, where we provided a new release, and together with a new release we did the implementation. And the next release will be in August. It was in August, but let's assume today is in July. And then we have the challenge to do a regression testing for the already implemented processes, because with lead to cash and the enhancements, maybe the sales processes and even the finance processes could be impacted, and you want to do regression for that, but you want to also have a full integration and maybe acceptance test for the end-to-end scenario. And the same for manufacturing, but that's nothing new. It's new implementation. You have the scope items can be implemented using requirements and so on. So also here, we recommend to use the activate content. You even could change the assignment of the activate roadmap to the project. The impact of that would be you lose all activate tasks in your project for the implementation, but you will get them for upgrade. But you can also use just the roadmap from the roadmap viewer to get the content, to get the advice how to deal. There are a lot of good PowerPoints regarding S/4HANA Test Automation tool, how to use it, how to use that content, how to use the post-upgrade test in S/4HANA that will be even executed by SAP. You don't need to take care, but we can consume those in Cloud ALM and make the results transparent. And this is all documented in the roadmap. You can use that. We have here the 3 standard processes in one end-to-end process and the manufacturing processes that are implemented. Requirements were created, again, same procedure, user stories. Standard test cases have been imported and adjusted for S/4HANA processes. And of course, in this case, also the automated test cases that S/4HANA provides from SAP to customers that they will be provided automatically to Cloud ALM test preparation as soon you scope the processes. And that's a big advantage. They even contain for some processes API tests that you can use for regression. And we have also the post-upgrade tests that have a limited scope, not a full process, but maybe a creates else order. A basic functionality that will work for every customer. And if this process is scoped in your S/4HANA tenant, then it will be automatically provided in the test automation tool. And for those tests that are not covered by S/4HANA test automation tool, because they are not part of the S/4HANA solution, but maybe developed on BTP, Integration Suite, Ariba, and so on, of course, there is an opportunity to automate them before you will go live, because you want to do regression also for those one in future. And the first use case is now to start the acceptance and integration test for the new scopes that we want to implement. And here I will switch to the system. So again, we have here a nice project overview that could be customized to the tiles that are interesting for you. Means I want to see which processes and scopes are implemented, what is the current status of those processes. I see 13 processes are already in production, 3 are in realization. The good thing is all test cases are prepared. In the previous test runs, test cycles, we have already 12 passed, but we see there's a lot of open. So that's the way of working. And now I switch to the requirements, traceability, to give you an overview how that could be used for preparing your tests from a new implementation point of view. You see here, there are requirements that are still in realization. A lot of those are already confirmed. How to find now the best way for your current wave, how to deal with that. So first of all, I want to check if for any acceptance test that is requirement, do I have the test cases available? I have predefined some views with some predefined filters. That is something I recommend for every customer that wants to work in this way, that for certain use cases, define variants with filters, with additional filter fields that would be available if you do adapt filters. You can include even the release, and that I will show. Currently, my question is, are all the requirements ready for test? And here I have put in a filter. The requirement is still in realization. The feature is already deployed to QA system. All user stories are done, and the test cases are prepared. And we see here there are 8 requirements where this is fulfilled. I can also check if this is automated or manual, so I can here include a filter for test case type. Typically in this case, for requirements-based testing, I will still assume that these are manual, and yes, the number has not been changed. And the other use case, I'm thinking now about wave. I am working in a new wave, and to this wave we have defined a release 2308, and this is how I defined a filter for wave 2. And now we see here there is a new field for filtering. If you find it also in the advanced filter sections that you could include. And as I did a good preparation, I assigned my requirements to a release. And one release was for wave 1, and this one is for wave 2. And this I can already use for starting my tests. Even if I do an integration test, I can even make these naming conventions for my requirements in a sequence. The end-to-end process will work. But I can also do the same in a test plan. I will show you that later on, how that works. So I will now create a test plan. I will switch via the navigation path. I will create a test plan for the end-to-end integration test, for the ALM Summit end-to-end. I skip all these attributes because of timing. I will assign test cases, and here I can also use some naming convention features. I enter end-to-end, and if I have several end-to-end processes part of my scope, I can also use that with a naming convention E2E underscore finance, whatever it's needed. And with that, I go to the whole filter. I now want to focus on manual testing because also this process needs to be somehow accepted. It's based on a requirement, so I will focus on manual test cases. And later on we will see it for automated test cases. I will include those all to my test plan. And I will set the status to in testing. Create the test plan. It was still in draft mode, now it's created, and I go to test execution. Select my end-to-end test, and what you see here, the test cases that are part of the end-to-end processes. So the first one is lead to opportunity, then opportunity to quote, quote to order. As I use the naming convention and the default sorting is by test case title, I have already at least visualized the sequence of testing, and then typically you could start testing here in going in, execute, and if the first one is done, the next one can continue. We have no constraints yet, no you get notification if the first test case is ready, the next one get notified, will come later. But this one already brings you the transparency of what is a sequence of several test cases part of an end-to-end scenario. So then we now to focus on the regression testing, starting with preparing the automation. And with Cloud ALM, we are consuming, managing different tools, currently S/4HANA Cloud Test Automation tool and Tricentis Test Automation integrated with Cloud ALM. And for S4HANA, we provide additional content. We have for each standard S4 process scope items, we have test cases that are provided by SAP, but could be adjusted and must be managed by the customer. So you need to orchestrate, you need to check if the standard process fits to your process that you have customized. We also provide API tests. S4HANA Cloud provides many APIs that also might be a matter of change, but APIs should be stable from the consumer point of view, and so you can also use these API regression tests or automated tests for that. And we have on top of that post-upgrade test with some basic functionality like create sales order that is tested, and the test case are provided by SAP, and also execution is done by SAP, and we can get the information, the statuses, and the outcome of the test runs to Cloud ALM if you are interested. Anyway, if there will be some issues, you will get notified by the S4HANA team. And for Tricentis, we cover all the rest. Any processes running on any SAP solution, standard, enhanced customer processes, currently with a web interface, a web application, is supported later on also. If you still want to work in SAP GUI, which is possible also with S4HANA Cloud, at least with the HTML GUI, that is even possible with the current version, like Nicolas showed in his session. But SAP GUI access, I'm not sure if this exists at all directly to the public cloud. But APIs would also be an option coming in future. In the Tricentis, that means if you define your own APIs in the integration suite, you can also use the Tricentis Test Automation tool when it comes with the APIs to also automate the test for that. The approach with S4HANA is, like shown before, we use our standard API, providing the creation procedure for the test. Actually, if I create a new test case, it will search for a test case that is already available for that scope item, and you will just get assigned it. If it's a custom process, there will be a really new test case created in Cloud, in SAP for HANA, and then you can start also creating the content, authoring the test. There is one potential confusion in S4HANA Test Automation tool. They named what we link to Cloud ALM, they named that entity test plan. And we have a different entity in Cloud ALM that is also called test plan. You should know that this works in this ways. So a test plan consists of one or more test processes. Typically it's just one test process, completing covering the whole scope item. There are test data containers within there where you can adjust the data for your own master data and so on. And you have an execution environment that then will execute the tests in the S4HANA Public Cloud Edition. And you get the results back and the logs and everything is there. And we have a similar approach with Tricentis. So there we have also the possibility to create or sync test cases with Cloud ALM. The authoring takes there. Nicolas and Matthias made a great presentation before in this afternoon. And that looks quite simple and easy to go forward and create and compose in an efficient way using these reuse components and automate test cases. And there is a hosted agent that is optional and coming in future, and a customer managed agent that is part of the OEM version that we give every customer with the enterprise support contract. How does it look like? So if I go now to the test preparation, I will show you just how the integration is done. For those who not have seen the session from Nicolas, we have here an automated test case from S4HANA called Accounting and Financial Close. Just need to click here on the test case, then I have here the test case link to S4HANA, and it opens the test case in S4HANA Cloud. And here we see there is a data variant. There are some logs if it was already executed as a test data container. You can also go into the test process in details, and there is always a nice pop-up that you can close. And then you see really on a step-based approach that these are the activities that are processed when you execute the test. The same we have for Tricentis. So I can here filter on the automation provider. We see here S4HANA TAT is the one for S4HANA, and TTA for SAP. That's a Tricentis one. And also here we can directly navigate to Tricentis Test Automation, and we'll see that there is a test case already existing with a rebar-based use case. So open a catalog, add items to shopping cart, check out, and so on, and that can be used to orchestrate it in Cloud ALM. So coming back to the presentation, now how to plan and execute the whole scenario means we have the acceptance test, we have the end-to-end integration test and the regression test. We have done the preparation for that. So one check would be needed to see the coverage. But before of that, I want to show you this nice analytics feature which covers release and timelines. And here you have on the one side, on top, you have the releases. These are predefined releases for your project that you have created. But you see also here on the bottom, here we have S4HANA milestones. Maybe I show it in the system, then it gets larger. So we have here the release and time frame feature. By default, it selects a deployment plan that is linked to your project, and then you can here select the releases. So we have here the one from February with the S4 upgrade that was already part of your implementation. And we have here the upcoming upgrade with the release to it. And that is something, if you go to timelines, you see here, that is the one you have defined on your own and which is in sync with the S4HANA Cloud upgrades. And here you get also information on the timelines of deployment of S4HANA, the new release, to customer, to your test system, and to your development and production system. And you see here there's at different times, and for the test system, you see also the time frame that you have for testing starting at July 29 until August 19. So it's not too long time frame, and therefore it's good to prepare before. And in future, what we want to provide, we want to link test plans to releases and also put in then the test plans with their time frame into this Gantt chart. But that is not available. That is something next year, most likely. But it makes a lot of sense to bring here the transparency on then related items like feature, requirements, user stories, defects are already there. But test cases not. But together with the test plans, we can also include the test cases and their status here. Then you have for the full release that might be realized in different projects, you have the full transparency on the test activities. The next thing I want to show you in the traceability is I want to see if all the processes are covered by automated test cases, that you have at least one automated test case for each process. And again here I use the solution process traceability, and I defined a variant for that. And what is a variant? It's just here a filter on test case type, automated, and a kind of grouping on the scope that I have done. And here I see these are the manufacturing processes that are not live yet, and the end-to-end process lead to cache that is also not live. You could also group it by solution process status. That is quite simple. You can just switch here this one, and then you have again the view which processes are already implemented and which are part of the current wave. And then you can check also the coverage for the upcoming activities. So now the idea is to create, as I know, I have a coverage of 100% with automated test case for my processes. I will take an example to create a test plan for that, combining automated test cases from Tricentis, but could also be combined with automated test cases from S/4HANA. Doesn't matter. Orchestration is here abstract level, and you can combine whatever you want. Regarding lead to cache, it's a big scenario. We recommend, or actually it's only the one option, and Nicola also showed it, or Matthias in their session. We have no possibility to hand over test data with Cloud ALM to the test automation tool. That means if you have an end-to-end process, this end-to-end process should be modeled in one big test case in Tricentis to be able to hand over from the first step, create sales order, the sales order number, to the next step, delivery. And that is why we say do the whole end-to-end process in Tricentis. If you have several variants of that, you can make the reuse of certain aspects, and you compose then, you might have several end-to-end test cases for the same end-to-end process. And that is an approach that you can manage in the same way. And the way of creating then a test plan, it's not really difficult and different to the manual one. You could use also, at this point of time, as we don't have tags for test plans available yet, some naming convention like using RT for regression test, using E2E for end-to-end tests, using AT for acceptance tests, so it's up to you. I will now do it for the whole release, knowing that all the scopes should be covered. And start assigning test cases. So here I don't provide a filter at the starting point. I will just use this one and give me all the automated ones. If you have different naming convention for manual and automated tests, you can also use abbreviation like RT for your automated tests. Then you might have also some manual tests for regression. You can also give them the RT tag. Currently we don't have a tag filter in the test planning, but that will also come, and then you can use it. And you see also here we have a lot of API tests that is part of different scopes in the sales area. There are a lot of them in the manufacturing. You see there are them. You can basically then select all of them, include it, and put it in your test plan. And whenever you set this to in testing and create, you will have the possibility to execute it. I will now show it for the S/4HANA. A accounting and financial close a little bit too large, but for this one, I try to start execution and hopefully it works. Sometimes there's a connectivity problem between our tenants, but typically it works. It takes a while because it's a quite large process also, but not as large as the financial close. So this is only the starting procedure, and then we can monitor the progress while refreshing the UI. Currently it's still triggering the starting of the test case, and at a certain point of time it should be really start, and you can monitor that. And what we also need to do here is, of course, we need to have for each test plan a kind of bulk starting activity that you can take a test plan that only covers automated test case and say start all test cases in that, and then the rest you don't need to wait for that. Currently it's a single trigger for each test case. Yeah, takes a while. Let's go on with the presentation, and later we can check what is the result. So as mentioned, we have here then the transparency. This slide is already what I showed in the system. We need to include all the scope items and related test cases for the regression, an upgrade use case, the summary would be for that. Starting your implementation following best practice is a good starting point also for the upgrade use case for any regression test. If you have not structured your test cases using the scopes or your processes using scopes in a different areas, you will have difficulties to manage a lot of test cases. If you use the scopes, you have it much easier because the scope I reused in the whole process end to end from the implementation perspective, but also for regression test point of view, that you really can see per scope, and if you want to get more details per process, are test cases available, how is the status in the execution, and so on. Manage the implementation via requirements. That allows you to really also track certain requirements separately. Maybe you have also an iterative approach to implement a process in several iterations. Then you can create two requirements for the same process. One requirement will be completed in wave 1, another one in wave 2. That allows you to have dedicated acceptance tests. And this simplifies test orchestration for future upgrades. As I showed, if you've done it in that way, it's much easier. If you have already your transformation to S/4HANA or to the cloud, of course, it's not too late to start importing test cases. If later on we have the selective data transfer from Solution Manager and you manage your S/4HANA transformation with Solution Manager and Focus Build, no problem. You can also still go into that mode that scopes is your major angle for processes and underlying test cases, and reuse that also for the regression use case and upgrade use case. Additional automation, of course, that needs to be done. That is some work, but it will be simplified. For S/4HANA, it's very simple because you get them for free. You might need to adjust them, especially the data, but maybe even some steps are different. You can set some steps as optional, some steps as mandatory. That is, and you can even create own steps. And that allows you to orchestrate your test execution using test plans while considering functional aspects. But also you can create the same test plan again if you have several rollouts of the same processes, set of processes to different organizations. And that is something from the whole Cloud ALM for implementation will come later, but for testing, That was an initial requirement already for the larger customer we had since last year, that they need to have several test cycles for the same set of test cases. Good. Time is over, but we have maybe a little bit of time for Q&A, but there is also waiting downstairs then the evening event. Nicola will send you the microphone. Thanks, Nicola.
Yeah, hello. I have a question about performance testing, because you are talking about testing, manual,
Regression.
and what about early watch lookalike performance testing?
We have not put it into Cloud ALM,
No?
but there is a solution from Tricentis
Okay.
we can provide to you. It's not linked to Cloud ALM, but I think there is an opportunity to use the existing content of regression-related automated tests to convert it somehow to performance-related tests. But it's a completely different use case, because you need to run the same tests parallel with different angles and to simulate parallel users. It's a completely different use case, and therefore we have not included in the Cloud ALM for implementation yet, but maybe in future.
You have the test data container for the automation tools to use the customer data.
Yeah.
For integration tests and user acceptance testing, for example, if you use manual testing, is there something similar to update the test cases, or is the only way to do it each one by downloading it to Excel, replacing the data and uploading it again?
That's the current standard approach. What we also recommend as a kind of easier model, you can provide a URL to a SharePoint or whatever that contains an Excel with the data that is used from your business area, from your country, from your plant. So all the master data that fits to a certain test plan then, or to a test case, you link it. We have rich text, also includes URL. You can just copy and paste it. It will generate a URL. You can navigate it. That's the current workaround, I would say, to manage test data for manual testing. If you don't want to get in each test case, search for master data type and replace it with updated or your own data. If you use a standard best practice test case, of course, master data will not fit to your own master data.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? End? Okay. My colleagues say it's the end. So whenever you have additional questions, okay. If there is additional questions, I will be downstairs. We can take a drink and discuss your questions.